Our first storyteller is Cindy Super, who grew up just past Clearwater Junction on the banks of the Blackfoot River and has had the river in her life since she was 2 years old. She left Montana after getting a forestry degree from the University of Montana and has returned home after 6 years in the Army. She calls Missoula home and now works in the same place she grew up, 45 miles east of Missoula, as a forester for the Montana Department of Natural Resources. Please welcome Cindy Super.
I think so. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So the sun is warm on my skin. Not quite hot, just a little prickly, but warm. I can feel the warm breeze in my face blowing downriver like it usually does in midday. I'm walking east from my home, and as I kneel down, I can feel the soft Douglas fir needles against my hands, and I squeeze my small body, I'm probably about 6 or 7, into a little thicket. Almost instantly, it's cool, it's quiet. The sound of the river, about 40 feet below us, below the railroad trestle, is about all you can hear. Some buzzing flies. I watch the ants. I've entered Fairyland, and I don't remember where that term comes from, but it was my brother and sister and I's little sanctuary. It was in this space that we could hide in the trees, we could play along the river, rolling rocks into the river, crawling down to the banks. My parents, who learned about or knew about free-range parenting before that was even a thing, they gave us really clear boundaries. Don't cross Highway 200. Don't cross the river without supervision. That was it. When my brother was 3 and he lit the carpet on fire, we got 2 more boundaries. That was go outside and never, ever play with matches. So outside we were for my entire childhood. Fairyland, we would roll rocks over in the river and pull hellgrammites up. My mom, who came from North Dakota and is a social butterfly, active in the school board, active with our church, plays in the Missoula Symphony. She married my dad, a transplant from Michigan, who had found his heart in Montana when he came here during leave in the Navy. Mom and Dad moved up to Clearwater, and I think my mom had been under the impression that this was just going to be a short time. And by the time I was 2, since we had lived in about 6 different places, short time meant, what, 2, 3 years? So 30 years later, when Dad retired, she made it 16 years, though, and in the meantime, she taught us how to swim across the river. My mom, who didn't like to be cold, didn't like to wake up early, had gone hunting with Dad exactly 1 time before deciding that loud noises that came on suddenly and having to wake up early and hike uphill, why would you do that? Mom taught us how to swim across the river. Mom taught us that snakes were fine, but should be outside. And I was probably close to 30 before I realized how terrified my mother is of snakes. Dad loved to hunt and fish. He never took us fly fishing, I think because he really just wanted to have some time to his own after dealing with fire crews and firefighters and 3 little kids. But we spent every waking moment on the river. So when I was about 8 years old, I managed to get chicken pox. You know, chicken pox, like the itchy, icky, nasty little bumps. I gave it to my entire elementary school, all 12 of us. So only 12 kids in the school, and they all got chicken pox, and the culprit was me because I got it first, which I thought was unfair. And then when everybody else was sick and I was healthy, I had the opportunity to go with Mom one day Every week, we went to town twice a week. Sundays for church and groceries, and Thursday night for symphony rehearsal. So Sunday morning rolls around, my brother and sister are sick and oozing and watching TV, and I get to go to town with Mom. I felt so grown up. I got to ride in the front seat. We go to church, and the young pastor, the new pastor who was in the congregation, the young vicar and his wife, I don't know if they felt they needed to get to know us better. Somehow they invited us to lunch. So the country bumpkins go to a nice lunch. Of course, Mom is in her element. We're sitting there, and this is, of course, before cell phones. So Mom, borrows the phone in the kitchen to call Dad. So my father had been left home unsupervised with 2 young children. And being the proactive grass and forest manager that he is, decided that it would be a great idea to burn the knapweed that was kind of in the pasture nearby our house. So Mom thought maybe enough time had passed that any catastrophe had been averted. She thought she'd call and check in. I remember trying to feel grown up and talking to the vicar's wife on the couch. I don't know what she was asking. And eventually I get the impression that there's a pretty serious conversation going on in the kitchen. Mom gets off the phone and says, "Well, your father burned down Fairyland." So suddenly I'm not so grown up anymore. Dad had lit the grass and knapweed on fire, and the winds that always so regularly flow down the hill and down the valley had shifted suddenly. They jumped across his fire line, the flames did, and tore through the grass into our little sanctuary. The flames were stopped by the Blackfoot River and by Highway 200. That could have been bad had they not been. And my sister recalls seeing our father run across the driveway and yell at her and my brother to get into the engine. So they get into a fire engine and they go to fight the fire. And now all of a sudden, I missed out on all that fun. I didn't get to go on the engine. And Dad burned down Fairyland. And I still have itches and I still have these scars. This is dumb. But it was a good experience. Fairyland, I was probably, 8. Of course, it was black and scarred, much of the Blackfoot is right now, as you can see. But when I went back recently, I was hired 4 or 5 years ago at the Clearwater unit, and I had been there before, but I hadn't gone all the way to Fairyland. And there's fresh grass, there's small trees, fewer of the Doug fir, but there's more ponderosa pine, which is more for that area anyway. There are still hellgrammites in the Blackfoot. And that river continues to flow by our home, by where I work now, for what I hope will be a few years. And if all the experiences that we had with that time on the river, seeing that rebirth and the regrowth after the fire was a good lesson as a kid. That even after a fire, life continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.